I stood in front of my childhood home with 2 suitcases at my feet, staring at the door I had walked through 1,000 times before. This was the house where Mom used to bake my birthday cakes, in that little kitchen corner by the window. I never imagined I would leave this place like this. My dad chose a woman he had known for only 1 year over his own daughter, who had been by his side for 22 years. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever felt abandoned by someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally. This story might just break your heart. My mother, Linda, passed away from breast cancer when I was 18 years old, right when I was about to start college. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed during those final days, holding her hand while she told me to be strong and to take care of my father. She knew he would struggle without her. They had been married for 25 years, and their love was the kind you read about in novels. When she closed her eyes for the last time, a part of my father died with her. I made the decision to attend a university close to home so I could stay with Dad. I did not want him to come home to an empty house every night. For 3 years after Mom passed, we leaned on each other. We cooked dinner together on Sundays, watched old movies she used to love, and visited her grave every month with fresh flowers. I took over the household duties without complaint. I cleaned, cooked, did laundry, and made sure Dad had everything he needed. He always told me I was his pride and joy, the reason he kept getting out of bed every morning. Those 3 years were hard, but we survived them together. Dad threw himself into his work as a construction engineer, and I focused on my accounting degree. We found a rhythm, a new normal, that honored Mom's memory while allowing us to move forward. I thought we would always have that bond. Then Diane appeared. Dad met her at a company event about 1.5 years ago. She was a real estate agent, 14 years younger than him, with a confident smile and an easy laugh. When he first told me about her, I was genuinely happy. I wanted Dad to find companionship again. Mom would not have wanted him to spend the rest of his life alone. Diana seemed wonderful at first. She brought me flowers, asked about my classes, and complimented how well I had taken care of my father. She told me she admired strong young women and that she hoped we could become close. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. After only 6 months of dating, Dad announced they were getting married. I was surprised by how fast everything was moving, but I kept my concerns to myself. He seemed happy, truly happy for the first time since Mom died. How could I take that away from him? The wedding was small but elegant. Diana wore a cream-colored dress, and Dad looked handsome in his gray suit. I stood beside him as his best woman, smiling for the photographs, even though something in my chest felt tight. Diana and her 2 children from her previous marriage, Brittany, who was 16, and Jason, who was 14, moved into our house the following week. The changes started small, so subtle, I almost did not notice them at first. Diana rearranged the living room furniture, saying the old layout felt cramped. Then she redecorated the kitchen, replacing Mom's vintage canisters with modern stainless steel ones. One afternoon, I went looking for Mom's record collection, the jazz and soul albums she used to play on Sunday mornings, and found them buried in boxes in the basement. When I saw that the wedding portrait of my parents had been removed from the living room wall and replaced with a large photograph of Dad and Diana's wedding, my heart sank. That picture had hung there for over 20 years. I mentioned it to Dad, gently telling him it hurt to see Mom's photo gone. He promised he would talk to Diana about it. Nothing changed. Diana's comments started around that time, little remarks that seemed innocent on the surface but cut deep underneath. She mentioned how nice it must be for me to live at home, rent-free at my age. She wondered aloud why a grown woman still needed to stay with her father. She suggested I should be more independent, more ambitious. Each word was delivered with a smile, but I felt the sharpness behind them. 3 months after the wedding, Diana decided that Brittany needed a bigger room for studying. She told my father that my bedroom, the one I had slept in since I was a little girl, would be perfect. It had the best natural light in the house, she said, and a lovely view of the backyard garden where Mom had planted her roses. Dad called me into the kitchen one evening his voice hesitant and his eyes avoiding mine. He explained that Diana thought it would be best if I moved to the smaller room in the basement. Brittany was at a critical point in her education, he said, and she needed a proper space to focus on her studies. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. That room held so many memories. Mom used to sit on my bed and read me stories when I was small. We had painted the walls together when I turned 13, choosing a soft lavender because it was her favorite color. From my window, I could see the rose bushes she had planted the year I was born. I asked Dad why Brittany could not take the basement room instead. His face tightened, and he repeated what Diana had told him. It would not be fair for her children to have the lesser space when they were adjusting to a new home. I wanted to scream. This was my home. I had lived here my entire life, but I looked at my father's tired face and swallowed my anger. I agreed to move because I did not want to cause him more stress. I told myself it was just a room, just 4 walls and a ceiling. I could handle it. The basement was cold and dim, with one small window near the ceiling that let in barely any light. I hung Mom's old curtains to make it feel more like home, but nothing could shake the feeling that I had been pushed out of my own life. Diana's behavior grew bolder after that. She started cooking family dinners, but somehow always forgot about my food allergies. I am severely allergic to shellfish, something she knew because I had told her during one of our early conversations. Yet shrimp and crab kept appearing on the table. When I reminded her, she would apologize sweetly and say it must have slipped her mind. At mealtimes, Diana and her children would chat among themselves about inside jokes and shared memories while I sat in silence. Dad rarely looked up from his plate, and when he did, it was usually to respond to something Diana said. I became invisible in my own home. When I finally landed a job at a small accounting firm after graduation, I was thrilled. I ran downstairs to tell Dad, expecting him to hug me and tell me how proud he was. Instead, he glanced up from his phone and said congratulations without any warmth. Then he went back to texting Diana about their dinner plans. A week later, Diana presented me with a bill. She had calculated my share of household expenses, including food, utilities, and internet. The total came to $800 per month. My starting salary barely covered that amount, plus my student loans and car payment. I would have almost nothing left for savings or personal expenses. I tried to talk to Dad about it, but he sided with Diana. She was right, he said. It was time for me to contribute like an adult. I did not point out that Brittany and Jason contributed nothing. I did not mention that I had been taking care of this household for 3 years without asking for a penny. I just nodded and wrote the check. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I came home from work exhausted and went down to my basement room to change. That was when I noticed the wooden box was missing from my dresser. My heart stopped. That box had belonged to my mother. Inside it, she kept her most precious jewelry, including a delicate gold ring with a small sapphire that had belonged to her grandmother. Mom had told me she would give it to me on my wedding day. After she died, I kept that box on my dresser where I could see it every morning and remember her. I tore through my room searching for it. I checked every drawer, every shelf, every corner. It was gone. I found Diana in the kitchen preparing dinner. I asked her if she had seen my mother's jewelry box. She did not even look up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Oh, that old thing," she said casually. I was cleaning out the basement and threw away some junk that was taking up space. "You really should not keep so much clutter down there." I could not breathe. I ran outside to the garbage bins, but they were empty. The trash truck had come that morning. My mother's jewelry, her ring, the last physical connection I had to her was gone forever. I called my father at work, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. He came home an hour later and found Diana crying in the living room. She told him she had no idea those things were important. She said, I had never told her that I was always so cold to her, that she had tried so hard to make me feel welcome, but I rejected her at every turn. Dad turned to me with disappointment in his eyes. He told me I needed to apologize to Diana for upsetting her. He said they were just objects, and that I should learn to let go of the past. I stood there in shock as my father chose to comfort the woman who had just destroyed my mother's memory. Something inside me cracked that night, a break so deep I knew it would never fully heal. My 23rd birthday arrived 3 weeks later. It was always a bittersweet day for me because Mom had passed away exactly 1 week after my 18th birthday. She had been so determined to make that birthday special, insisting on baking my cake herself, even though she was weak from chemotherapy. It was the last cake she ever made me. I woke up that morning hoping Dad would remember. He did not need to throw a party or buy expensive gifts. I just wanted him to acknowledge the day, to remember that it mattered. He said nothing at breakfast. Diana and her kids did not mention it either. I drove to work and tried to focus on spreadsheets and client files, but my mind kept drifting back to birthdays past. Mom making pancakes shaped like the number of my age. Dad hiding presents around the house for me to find. The three of us singing together off-key and laughing. When I came home that evening, the family was seated around the dinner table eating pot roast. There was no cake, no candles, no wrapped packages. No one even looked up when I walked in. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before I finally spoke. I asked Dad if he knew what day it was. He paused with his fork halfway to his mouth, a flicker of something crossing his face. Then recognition dawned. "Oh," he said, "it is your birthday. I am sorry, sweetheart. I have been so busy lately." It slipped my mind. Diana let out a small laugh. "She is a grown woman," she said. "Birthdays are not that important anymore. No need to make a big fuss about it." I waited for my father to say something to defend me, to at least wish me a happy birthday properly. He just shrugged and went back to eating his dinner. I walked down to the basement and closed the door behind me. I sat on my bed in the dark and cried until I had no tears left. Then I picked up my phone and called the only person who had remembered my birthday. Marcus answered on the second ring. He had called me that morning to sing happy birthday just like he did every year. Now he listened as I poured out everything that had happened over the past 8 months. The lost room, the thrown-away jewelry, the constant small cruelties, and now this. My own father forgetting my birthday and not even caring. My brother was silent for a long moment after I finished. Then he spoke in a voice tight with controlled anger. He told me to pack my bags. He said I was moving in with him and his wife Tessa, and their daughter Lily. He said there was no way he was leaving me in that house for another day. I protested weakly. I did not want to impose on his family. They had a 3-year-old to take care of and their own lives to manage. But Marcus cut me off. He reminded me that I was his family, his little sister, and that would never change. Tessa wanted me there too, he said. They had actually discussed it weeks ago when I first told him about Diana, but they had not wanted to push me before I was ready. I agreed to move that weekend. On Saturday morning, I asked Dad if we could talk privately. We sat in the living room, the same room where Mom's wedding portrait used to hang. I told him I was moving out, that I would be staying with Marcus. He looked surprised, maybe even a little hurt. He asked why. I told him everything. I explained how Diana had made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I described the isolation, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the destruction of Mom's belongings. I told him that his forgetting my birthday was painful, not because of the day itself, but because of what it represented. He had forgotten me entirely. Diana must have been listening from the hallway because she suddenly appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were wet with tears, as she insisted that I was exaggerating, that she had done everything possible to make me feel included. She called me ungrateful and accused me of trying to sabotage her marriage. I watched my father look between us. I saw him take in Diana's tears and quivering lip. Then he turned to me with hardness in his eyes. He said I had never given Diana a fair chance. He said if I wanted to leave, then I should go. I waited. I waited for him to take it back, to remember who I was and what we had meant to each other. Instead, he walked over to Diana and put his arm around her, murmuring words of comfort. I went to my basement room and finished packing my last bag. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. As I carried my suitcases up the stairs and through the house I had grown up in, I paused in the hallway. There was still one photograph of Mom there, a small picture in a corner that Diana had apparently overlooked. I looked at her smiling face and silently promised her I would be okay. Dad did not come out to say goodbye. Living with Marcus and Tessa felt like stepping into warm sunlight after a long winter. They welcomed me with open arms, setting up the guest room with fresh sheets and flowers on the nightstand. Lily, my 3-year-old niece, was ecstatic to have her Auntie Zoe living with them. She insisted on showing me all her toys and demanded that I read her bedtime stories every night. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I had my own space, small but comfortable, and no one made me feel like a burden. Tessa often invited me to cook with her, and we would spend evenings trying new recipes while Marcus played with Lily in the living room. It was everything a family should be. I threw myself into my work, determined to build a stable future for myself. My dedication paid off when I received a promotion after just 6 months moving from junior accountant to senior associate. My boss praised my attention to detail and my ability to handle difficult clients with grace. I saved every extra dollar dreaming of someday having my own apartment. I also started seeing a therapist, something I should have done years ago. We worked through my grief over losing Mom, my complicated feelings about Dad, and the trauma of being pushed out of my childhood home. I learned to set boundaries and to recognize my own worth. It was not easy, but slowly I began to heal. 8 months after I moved out, Marcus called me into the kitchen one evening with a strange expression on his face. He had just gotten off the phone with a lawyer, and what he told me next changed everything. Apparently, Mom had created a secret will that Dad knew nothing about. In the years before her death, she had quietly set aside money in a separate savings account. The total was $200,000 to be divided equally between Marcus and me. But that was not all. Mom had also inherited a small beach cottage from her parents, my grandparents, who had passed away when I was a child. In her will, she specified that this cottage would go to me alone. The catch was that these assets would only be revealed when I turned 23, and had established an independent life away from my father. The lawyer had a letter Mom wrote to accompany the will. Marcus handed it to me, and I read it with tears streaming down my face. "My darling Zoe," it began, "if you are reading this, then my worst fears may have come true. I love your father, but I know his weaknesses. He needs someone to lean on, and I worry that if he remarries, his new wife might not treat you kindly. I wanted to make sure you would always have something of your own, a safety net that no one can take from you. This cottage was my sanctuary as a child, and now I give it to you. Build a beautiful life there, my sweet girl. Know that no matter where I am, my love for you will never fade. Mom." I held that letter against my heart and sobbed. Even from beyond the grave, my mother was still protecting me. She had known that I would need this lifeline. News of the inheritance spread quickly through our extended family, and it was only a matter of time before it reached my father. 2 weeks after I learned about the will, he showed up at Marcus's house. I was helping Lily build a tower with her blocks when the doorbell rang. Marcus answered it, and I heard my father's voice asking if he could speak with me. Marcus looked back at me silently, asking if I wanted to see him. I nodded and stood up, brushing off my jeans. Dad looked older than I remembered, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. He said he wanted to talk, that he had made terrible mistakes, and that he wanted me to come home. I noticed something in his expression, an eagerness that did not quite match the remorse in his words. The timing of his visit felt too convenient, coming so soon after the will was revealed. I agreed to talk, but insisted we do it there with Marcus present. We sat in the living room, and Dad began his apology. He said he had not realized how badly Diana had treated me. He claimed he had finally confronted her, and she had admitted to some of her behavior. He was reconsidering their relationship, he said. He wanted to make things right with me. I listened quietly until he finished. Then I asked him directly whether he had come because he truly missed me or because he had just learned about the inheritance Mom left me. He hesitated a moment too long. He said it was both, but his eyes shifted away from mine. I told him I had waited 8 months for him to reach out. 8 months without a single phone call, text message, or any sign that he wondered how I was doing. He only appeared now after learning there was money and property involved. His face flushed and he tried to explain, but I held up my hand to stop him. I said I would not be returning to that house. It had stopped being my home the day he chose Diana over me. I told him I was moving to the beach cottage Mom had left me, that I would start a new chapter of my life there surrounded by her memory and her love. My father's expression crumpled. He asked if there was any way we could fix things between us. I looked at this man who had raised me, who had once been my hero, and felt something shift in my chest. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something quieter. Sadness, maybe? Acceptance. I told him he had a new family now, and that he should focus on them. I said I would be fine on my own. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. This was not about punishment or revenge. It was about protecting myself from more pain. I had given him chance after chance, and he had chosen Diana every single time. Marcus walked him to the door while I stood by the window watching. As Dad's car pulled out of the driveway, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I did not know what the future held for our relationship, but I knew I could not keep waiting for him to become the father I needed. I moved into Mom's cottage on a bright Saturday morning in early summer. The place needed work after years of sitting empty, but I did not mind. Rolling up my sleeves and repainting walls felt like therapy. I chose soft blues and warm whites colors that reminded me of the ocean just a short walk away. In the backyard, I planted rose bushes, just like the ones Mom had grown at our old house. I could almost hear her voice guiding me as I dug into the soil and gently placed each plant. When the first blooms appeared weeks later, deep red petals unfurling toward the sun, I sat on the back porch and cried happy tears. I transferred to a branch of my company closer to the cottage and continued to advance in my career. The work challenged me, but I had found confidence I never knew I possessed. My therapist said I was thriving, and for the first time I believed it. Marcus, Tessa, and Lily visited often. Lily declared the cottage her favorite place in the world because she could collect seashells and build sandcastles. Watching her run along the shoreline reminded me of my own childhood summers when life was simple and full of joy. I made friends with my neighbors, a retired couple who had known my grandparents decades ago. They shared stories about Mom as a young girl, memories I had never heard before. I joined a book club at the local library and volunteered at a community garden. Slowly, this place became home. Dad called a few times over the following months. Our conversations were short and awkward, but filled with long silences and careful words. I kept my boundaries firm. I did not hate him, but I also would not let him hurt me again. Through the family grapevine, I heard that things between Dad and Diana had soured. Apparently, the charm she had shown him during their courtship faded once there were no more obstacles to remove. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a distant sadness for a man who had lost so much by chasing the wrong things. Standing on the beach one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about everything that had brought me here. Losing Mom had shattered my world. Being abandoned by Dad had nearly destroyed what was left. But somehow I had found my way through the darkness. I realized that family is not just about blood. It is about the people who show up for you, who celebrate your joys and carry you through your sorrows. Marcus and Tessa and little Lily were my family. The friends I had made in this community were my family. And Mom, even though she was gone, would always be my family too. Her love had never really left me. It was there in the cottage walls, in the roses blooming outside. In the letter I kept tucked in my nightstand drawer. She had seen the future and prepared for it, making sure her daughter would never be truly alone. The hardest lesson I learned was that you cannot force someone to love you the way you deserve. You can only choose to love yourself enough to walk away when they prove they will not. It took me a long time to understand that leaving was not giving up. It was giving myself permission to find something better. If you have ever been hurt by someone who should have protected you, I hope you know that their failure is not your fault. You are worthy of love that does not come with conditions. You are capable of building a beautiful life even when the people who were supposed to support you let you down. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself over a painful relationship? Leave a comment below and share your story. If this video touched your heart, please give it a like so others can find it too. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about resilience, healing, and finding your own path. And share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community. Whatever you are going through, remember that you are stronger than you know. You have survived every hard day so far, and you will survive whatever comes next. May you find peace, may you find people who truly cherish you, and may you always remember that some love never dies.